Hey everyone, welcome back to Keto and Crime. Today we've got week 3, day 17 of the Vallow trial. This was Thursday, April 27th. All the breakdown of the testimony here. As a reminder, I'm Tracy. I run this channel. We do true crime, dark history, and sci-fi and horror movie reviews and analysis. And I also changed my tree with the holidays. We have not moved past Easter yet, but we will very, very soon. I listened to the recordings from the trial that are released by the East Idaho News very generously, free of charge, and I used the reporter from the East Idaho News that's in the courtroom. I use their analysis, and I read along while I'm listening to the recording, and I make my own notes and break it down to a very short listen for everybody. So I consolidate 5 to 6 hours of testimony into less than 30 minutes. So that's what I do. Also, I have a whole lot of background on this case, including analyzing Chad Daybell's books, as well as Lori Gibbs' books, Jason Mau's books. Everybody associated with this, I've reviewed their work. I've done deep dives on their lives, and I've got a huge playlist, which I will stick right up here for this case. So anyway, let's dive into this. I hope I earn your subscription, and thank you so much to my channel members and patrons. Now, with that being said, let's get into it. Notable people present on Thursday were, of course, Chad Daybell's attorney, John Pryor, as well as Tammy Daybell's sister and brother-in-law, Jason and Samantha William. It's either William or Gwillem. I don't want to pronounce that wrong, so I'll just say William. They are here. And if you're she is the sister of Tammy Daybell, who was Chad Daybell's wife of around 30 years, who mysteriously died in October of 2019. We now know from asphyxiation due to the fact that her body was later exhumed. So it's going to be quite interesting what's going to happen here today. The judge convenes court. Rachel Smith of the prosecution recalls Dr. Christensen, who was on the stand at dismissal yesterday. She is the FBI forensic anthropologist, the one that was in charge of sifting through all the bones, since 𝗙𝗂𝗀's bones were in such poor shape. Also making sure, since 𝗙𝗂𝗀 was taken out of the pet cemetery on Chad Daybell's property, that we actually had human bones rather than animal bones. So she was the one that was doing all of the analysis on those bones. And so she resumes her questioning with the prosecution. The question is pretty simple. They go through pictures of bones and other things, and she points out why she had such analysis, how they may have gotten that way and what happened. Basically, were these bones the result of a crime or an accident? And that's kind of how they went through it. And also, she was able to point out that a lot of these bones were damaged as they were trying to conceal them. So a lot of shenanigans going on with these bones. And after about an hour, Rachel tenders the witness, and defense attorney John Thomas conducts the cross-examination. The first thing he asks is about the injuries not being consistent with a dismemberment type of case. And also, he asks her how many dismemberment cases she had investigated. She says a handful, probably fewer than 10. But she says it's constantly reading cases and reports about dismemberment cases. And she says typical dismemberment cases are done by cutting around joints, and that was not done with 𝗙𝗂𝗀. She says basically that hers was not to reason why. Hers was just to figure out what happened to not what happened, or why it happened, but what bones could reasonably be examined by the coroner and the pathologist to put together the story. She wasn't there to say that 𝗙𝗂𝗀 was hacked up after she was killed, which obviously, or how 𝗙𝗂𝗀 was killed. She was just there to say, this is 𝗙𝗂𝗀's bone. This has not been damaged to the extent that you can't investigate it and put together a story. And that was all she was there to do. And she was pretty point blank with that. Good on her. John Thomas then asks how long her study on 𝗙𝗂𝗀's bones took. She Dr. Christensen referred to her notes, and it took from August 23rd to September 22nd, so right at a month. This time, Thomas dismisses the witness or tenders the witness, and Rachel Smith has one redirect question. She says, if you can't tell a specific tool, how do you determine it was actually caused by sharp trauma? Which refers to the trauma imparted by something with a very small surface area. She says, Dr. Christensen explains the difference between blunt trauma and large surface area trauma and answers the question that way. And then she is then dismissed. I assume, like everyone else, she remains under subpoena. The prosecution calls 𝗙𝗵𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗃. He works, he's an FBI lab technician working out of Quantico, which is the home of the FBI Academy. He's a forensic examiner and works with Firearms and Tool Marks Division. And the prosecutor, Tiana Rawlings, will be questioning him. Of course, we have the obligatory talking about his background. He has 13 years experience in the Quantico lab, including his college and FBI Academy training. He says that he has many years of experience looking at these types of cases and has worked with many tools and firearms, as well as working with the manufacturers of many tools and firearms, so that he can delve it down to, within a millimeter of the evidence. He then tells what process is taken when a tool or a weapon is sent from a crime scene to the lab. He goes through what they do, their process, how those are stored, logged. He also kind of goes through some of the testing, such as testing casting material, seeing if there's fingerprints or minute impressions on tools, just kind of taking us through what he does to get the analysis that he's able to get. Rawlings asked to admit some photographs. John Thomas asked for a sidebar. After a little bit of discussion with the judge, they come back and admit the photographs, which are basically photographs of bones with specific tool markings marked by 𝗙𝗵𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 during his exam. And they begin to go over what those marks mean and what the examination means. He explains how he saw, how he leveled what was a fracture, what was a blunt force trauma fracture, at what angle the tool might have been used, and so he kind of goes through that altogether. One thing he does say is he was not able to nail down the exact weapon or tool that was used to make the markings in Tylee's bones, but he can say it was a chopping type of blade, such as a machete or a hatchet. So he's got it narrowed down that way. And he said that a lot of it looks like it came from a chopping type action. So whereas Dr. Christensen was just there to identify what bones were fit for examination and was not qualified to really say this was dismemberment, she was there only to talk about the bones. This is the person, this is the man that can tell you that yes, this was a dismemberment case and this is why. They show very few more photos of different bones with the markings, and he's able to take us through what those appear. And then Rawlings pretty much just asked him to summarize his findings, and he said he was able to outline tools that could have produced these marks, but not specifically determine, excuse me, allergies, determine each individual item, like this was specifically a hatchet, this was specifically a machete, but he can tell you that all of these markings came from that type of, chopping family, knife, hatchet, cleaver, something like that. He said some of them were obviously made with serrated teeth marks, so he assumes that whatever they used had a serrated blade. So Rawlings then has no further questions for 𝗙𝗵𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁, and John Thomas begins to conduct the cross-exam, but there will be he did question him again about his background, where he's received his education. We do more like that, and then there's a 20-minute recess. After the recess, Thomas asks 𝗙𝗵𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 more about his background with the National Intelligence University, and asks him to pretty much go over his entire employment history. John Thomas is a little bit infuriating. I mean, I know he's doing his job, but he tends to spend most of his cross-examination trying to find something in these experts' background that would make them not an expert. And often he just ends up proving the prosecution's case for them. This guy is 13 years experience. He went to college. He was a Marine. He knows weapons. He knows tools. You know, it doesn't matter what he did in a summer job in 1996, but it just seems that that's where John Thomas goes. I don't get it. 𝗟𝗃𝗁𝗂 did say that, these types of cases are infrequent, but they do happen, and lots of times his analysis is only to kind of help put together what happened in the crime scene, bullet in the wall, knife mark over here, kind of stuff. But then one thing Thomas did bring up is that none of the tools in Chad Daybell's garage or shed were sent to the lab for analysis, and 𝗟𝗃𝗁𝗂 confirms that. He said he was just looking at the bones, not the tools. So it leads them to believe that they weren't specifically trying to find a tool, like, the proverbial smoking gun on the property, but just to prove what happened here. Because I think what they were probably thinking is that probably that tool is long gone. It's probably been burned, melted down, buried somewhere else. Doubtful that that tool is still there. I don't think they're going to hack somebody up and then put it next to the rake. That's just what I'm thinking. Thomas's final question asked him to clarify between a stabbing mark and a chopping mark. Like, what's a stabbing tool versus a chopping tool? And 𝗟𝗃𝗁𝗂 simply says, in stabbing, the energy is being transferred from the tool to the surface in a very narrow area. So it's kind of, Badoom, and chopping action force is applied over a long access area. So it may decimate the entire bone rather than just one piece. And he said that's how you tell it's chopping versus stabbing, though that does not necessarily tell you what tool or what weapon was used, because you can chop with a long knife. You can also stab with a long knife. Again, he wasn't trying to pinpoint it's that knife over there. He was just trying to say what family of tools did this to these bones. And at this point, he is dismissed, but I assume, like everyone else, he remains under subpoena. Next, the prosecution calls retired Idaho State Police Trooper David 𝗚𝗏𝗡. He has worked as an analysis chemist in the state police lab, analyzing fire debris and drugs. He is now retired and coaches softball in northern Idaho. Rachel Smith is questioning him. On his background, he has examined tens of thousands of items affected by fire. So here's where we get into the burning of 𝗠𝗏𝗁𝗂's body, and says that he tested a pint-sized can containing decomposing flesh and other debris collected from Chad Daybell's property. He analyzed that they did contain gasoline. Smith has nothing further, so they just wanted to establish that fire was put, along with a fire agent, onto 𝗠𝗏𝗁𝗂. And so John Thomas begins cross-examining 𝗚𝗏𝗁𝗂, and he simply clarifies that he was looking for any ignitable liquids, paint thinners, gasoline, diesel. He's not offering any opinions on how it was burned, how long it was burned. He just was trying to prove that there was an accelerant placed on this thing that these particles came from, the pint-sized can of flesh, that whatever this came from had an accelerant on it and was ignited. Very, very, very methodical. I have a huge respect. I mean, okay, government agency aside, I have a huge respect for the people doing this analysis, because they take a lot of time and care to do it. And then Thomas asked him, John Thomas should really have a television talk show, because he's asking him how full this pint-sized can was. Did you work at McDonald's in 1995? Yes. Now, how much was in this pint can? It's these kind of questions that just irritate me about John Thomas. But anyway, since I don't recall how full it actually was, but normally it's about 3/4 full when we test it. And then they kind of take him, he asks 𝗚𝗏𝗁𝗂 how they do the testing. He talks about how they use a charcoal strip attached to a Christmas tree hanger to put in the substance and test it that way. And then he talks about how he came to his analysis. And at that time, John Thomas dismisses the witness. Next, Rob Wood calls Rylan Nolan. She is the lab manager for the Idaho State Police Forensic Department, so she is 𝗙𝗹𝗹𝗁𝗍𝗋's boss, and Rob Wood will be questioning her. He asks her to describe her experience. She shares her educational background. She says she's testified approximately 85 times before today about DNA analysis. Over the course of 20 years of experience, she's tested literally thousands of DNA samples. She explains how half comes from your mom, half comes from your dad, and it's a multiple step process to determine where DNA originated. She talks about the safety precautions and the sterile precautions they take when they are testing DNA to ensure there is no contamination. If my DNA got into that, it could, make the analysis incomplete or inconclusive or wrong. She talks about how their lab is accredited and how they've never really had any issues, and that in most cases, the results of DNA testing is 99.999%. So very close to 100%. So basically, she's there, even though she is 𝗙𝗹𝗹𝗁𝗍𝗋's boss, she is there to say that this was 𝗙lie Ryan and this was J.J. Vallow. And she talks about how 𝗙lie had sections of her rib and molars to be tested, and there was some biological samples, including some organic material from J.J. Vallow. She also got a sample through the court system of 𝗚𝗚, and she tested the samples, and it's 99.999% accurate that 𝗚𝗚 is 𝗙lie's mother. Basically, she was able to eliminate 99.99% of all other females, and said that it is, pretty much unlikely that anyone else would be the mother of this person that's remains were tested. They went through the same comparison through JJ's, eliminating everyone and saying that it's pretty sure 𝗚𝗚 is the mom of this child. And then they recess for lunch. So back from lunch, Nolan has been dismissed and with no cross-exam, and the judge makes an announcement that they need to be out early today on Thursday. So they're going to have to move fast, and that tomorrow, Friday, that is Friday the 28th, will be a short day with no lunch break. So they're going to go from 8 to 1 and dismiss at lunch. So it will be a shortened day. And then Rob Wood calls his next witness, which is Catherine Dace. She is a forensic biologist for Idaho State Police, and she has worked there since 2016. She describes her education history, job responsibilities. She received J.J. Vallow's autopsy samples, including hand swabs, nail swabs, teeth, plastics, and basically swabs also from 𝗚𝗚's apartment, a chain independent, and received 18 hand tools at the Daybell property. So they went to the Idaho State Police lab, not the FBI lab. She also spoke about the duct tape that she received that was around JJ, and that she described the process of testing these things, especially the duct tape, which had traces of blood on it. And they went over a few more of the tools and explained how they determine what's what. And then what on cross-examination, 𝗟𝗀𝗏 basically asked more about that, and was it possible for hair and blood, like from the duct tape, to get in there on the duct tape from the body bag, and pretty much he's told it's possible, but not in the amounts that I found it. So again, like John Thomas, 𝗟𝗀𝗏 has a wonderful way of proving the defense's case. She is then dismissed. Next up, Tara Martinez, another Idaho State Police employee, takes the stand, and she is being questioned by Rachel Smith, and she worked on lifting fingerprints from all properties involved and trying to match them, that is fingerprints of Chad, Lori, JJ, Tylee, Alex Cox, Melanie Boudreau, whoever had been in Lori's apartment, Chad's property, anywhere the children were in mass. They basically lifted a bunch of fingerprints from them and had her test it to see if any of those prints matched anything in conjunction with the hiding of the bodies, like the bags, the tools, all of that stuff. And then she tells the difference between visible fingerprints and latent, which are ones that are there but just can't be seen with the human eye. And basically what her entire testimony boils down to is that there was a fingerprint from a right small finger that matched the right small finger of Alex Cox on one of the black trash bags. And that is what she was able to deduce, that he had touched the bags at some point. They then go over some pictures of the evidence as it was brought in, and basically the prosecution tenders her at that point. And the defense does not even attempt to cross-examine. Then after a short afternoon break, Detective Chuck Cansetis of the Rexburg Police is recalled by the prosecution. He's been questioned by Rob Wood. They admit 2 exhibits that are containing satellite data and satellite images of the Daybell property. And basically the whole gist of this is that Cansetis is basically giving their analysis of who was killed where, and they determined, the day that he believes Tylee was killed in Burns, September 9th, 2019. There was no photographs of the actual burning. Now, these are like images you would find on the web, taken by Google Earth, and so to speak. So he said they had to pay $1,500 to get these pictures, because on cross-exam, he's asked that question, where did they get them? And so basically, because there were clouds obscuring the fire pit, no pictures of any burning was actually taken, but he still, rest assured, but all the other evidence, digital and otherwise, that's when it happened. Archibald, again, like I said, cross-examined, basically asked him about the clouds and was this really accurate, and of course Cassandra said that he wasn't going to say for sure, but, his years of being a detective, he was pretty sure. And so then he is dismissed. After a quick sidebar with the judge, the prosecution calls Tammy's sister, Samantha William. Lindsay Blake will be questioning her. So pretty much they start the questioning by asking her if she knew about the pet cemetery on Tammy's property. She said Tammy had shown it to her. She knew exactly where it is. She described it with the statue of the little dog that was put there after a niece's dog died. She shows Samantha a picture of property, and she points it out. She talked about how much Tammy loved people and animals and loved to take care of them. She loved her husband, her kids, her grandkids. She then is shown a picture of Tammy and asked if she knows who that is, and she said, that's my sister. Then Tammy's picture is put up on the screen, and William kind of tells them about their background, how that her and Tammy were the only 2 girls in a family with 5 kids. She says that she liked Chad when he and Tammy started to date. He treated Tammy well, was a good friend of her husband, Jason. They lived 2 blocks away from each other in Utah, so they were always doing things together with their kids. She said when Chad wanted to move from Utah to Idaho, Tammy was initially against it, but went ahead and went. She talked about Chad's past as a gravedigger. I have a whole summary of his autobiography right up here. And Tammy was working as a special ed secretary with the school system. She said on the morning that Tammy died, Chad called her saying that Tammy had been really sick the night before, had woken up with a coughing fit, and then when he woke up, he was awakened by her dead body, falling out of the bed. Samantha was very skeptical. She said she had seen Tammy 2 weeks prior. She was in perfect health. She was taking not only a clogging class, but training for a foot race. Said she was very healthy, in great shape. She says that Tammy never indicated that she thought Chad was having an affair. She said that for most of 2019, there seemed to be a little something off anytime they would visit. And she said in July, just a few months before all this happened, that Tammy showed up with a birthday gift for her, would not come in the house. Chad stayed in the car, and she was only allowed to stay 20 minutes. And it was an unannounced visit. So she said it was really weird. And at that point, they dismissed for the day. I will be back with the continuation of her testimony as soon as it concludes on Friday. And until then, I hope you've enjoyed this summary. Until next time, keep on crying.